Hello everyone, it's Rory Pratt from Pratt's Pods and Micro Soldering Repairs. So today I'm here with an iPad Air 2. This iPad Air 2 has been sent in for not charging from a regular of ours. So what we're looking at here is the charging port again, just like the iPad Air 1 I showed you. This is going to be a charging port fault. Excuse the noise from the traffic outside. So what I'm going to do is apply some flux firstly. It wants to come out. So apply some flux here. Hopefully you can all see well enough. Once we've applied some flux, we're going to go ahead and get a whole load of solder on our soldering iron and go over all of the connections with that. Basically what we're doing here is, by applying some partly leaded solder, we are lowering the melting point of the solder, which basically means that charging port's just going to come off that much easier, and basically stop from any damage happening to the port while we're removing it, because if you leave the unleaded solder on there, it can get quite messy. You can pull up some pads and all sorts. So there's two ways of pulling these charging ports off. You can do it like this, where you're just going to hold your soldering iron at the end and pull slowly while you work the solder in. This way is fine. It seems to be working very easily on this Air 2, so I'm just going to carry on. And the other way is to obviously do this with the leaded solder, and then just go with the heat gun to actually remove it. So there we go. So just remove, there's a bit of goo there that holds the charging port on next to the solder, so let's just get rid of that. So yeah, we've got quite a clean removal there. Now we're just going to go over, clean up them pads, make sure there's a decent amount of solder on them. Right, sorry about that. That was a busy couple of hours, so I've had to go away and do a bit of other work. So I'm back here now with this Air 2 charging port. Can't remember exactly where I was with it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this flux because it's gone a bit solid where it's been left there. I'm going to clean it up. Like that. Make sure the area is nice and clean. Dry it off. So there's a reasonably good amount of solder on all these pads. I think I will add a little bit more though. So flux again, some fresh flux this time. Take my big iron, let that warm up. I've already got solder on this. Put my fan in. Right. Now just make sure that there's plenty of solder on all these pads again. There we go. I am going to have to change my tip for the next bit. That's going from my big fat tip to my little pokey tip. That's the best one I've got for charging ports. So this is the new port in here. And this just needs lining up and sticking on there basically. And then once it's lined up, I'll go ahead and start soldering. So first of all, we get it roughly in place. Sorry, you might not see this very well because of my hands. That looks good. So, just jogged it. That looks good to me. So now I just need to solder in like I did on the last video I did. You just need to cap a couple first, just to make a good connection. And once they're sort of connected up, then you can just start going down the whole lot. So now I just have to go on every single one of these connections, get heat and a little bit of pressure. The heat melts the solder, the pressure forces it through the hole. Okay. Right, so now I'm just going to get a little bit more solder on my iron. I'm just going to add a little bit to each pad to help it all flow together. So, firstly it neatens it up a bit, secondly it ensures you've got a better contact because more solder on top, which is going to cause the heating through the pad, the heat through the pad to go a little bit better. So here we go. There's a bit more solder on all of them now. Not loads, like the tiniest little bit per pad. That's why I just sort of run over them like this, just to make sure there's a little bit on each pad. Then I'll go back over every single pad again. Now I'll individually go on each pad, some more heat, a little bit of pressure, and I follow very closely behind the soldering iron with my sort of flat tweezers, and the reason for that is to make sure that the charging port's being held down while the solder is wet. While the solder is wet, while the solder is liquid, in its liquid form, so that the charging port doesn't come away from the board and we still get a good connection there. You don't have to do this extra bit of solder on these charging ports. We never used to. I think it's a good idea to make sure you've got that really good connection there, because obviously the solder flows through, ensuring that we've got a good connection. So now I'm just going over and neatening it all up a little bit, and there you have it. That's one charging port on an iPad Air 2. So if I clean that up now, make sure it's nice and clean. That flux is horrible stuff. So you want to get it off for next time it's repaired. You're not getting your hands covered in horrible flux, because not nice stuff to have in your hands. And good job. So next, if I move my scope out of the way, so I can grab my housing. So I'm just going to stick this in very loosely. You can zoom out now. I'm just going to stick this in loosely and make sure it's taking a charge. So I'm not even putting the screws in, I'm just using my finger to hold. Yeah, 1.3. Lovely. Great. So, if I stick this back together now, just quickly, not fully, just so you guys can see that it's charging. I know it's charging, but you guys could just take my word for it. I'd rather show you that it actually is charging now and that the repair has worked where possible. So iPads, when they go through the generations, they get harder and harder to put back together. The great thing about the Air 2 compared to the Air 1 is when you're doing a charging port on it, if you put it all back together, or at least put the motherboard back in, and for any reason you find that you do have a loose connection or something, you can just solder it on while the board's still in the housing. I mean, I wouldn't recommend replacing the port while the board's in the housing, because that's not good practice. You won't get it lined up properly. A lot of heat around the battery is not good for it, all that sort of stuff. Take the sticker off. So now if I come and plug this in, no screws so okay. See it turning on there. Put my hand in here so I can make sure it's making contact with the battery good. And that's a 1.5 amp boot in at the moment, which I'd say is good. So turn this off so you can see a bit better. There we go. Charging. Perfect, and it's still at over 1 amp, so that's all sorted now. I can give it a jiggle. It seems to have come loose, but I think that's because it's not in the housing properly, so there you go. Give it a jiggle while it's properly in the housing. I'll double check it's probably my cable, to be honest. These cables get abused here, so I'll check that. But we have one iPad Air 2 all sorted. So I'll say again, as I say at most of my videos, that's Rory Pratt from Pratt's Pods and Micro Soldering Repairs. Turn that fan off, that's noisy. So if you have a problem with your iPad or any Apple device and someone has told you it can't be fixed, or someone's not able to fix it, or has told you that it needs a motherboard replacement, and they've given you a silly price, please feel free to get in touch. We do motherboard repairs and micro soldering services to trade. So if you've got a problem that you can't fix yourself, please feel free to get in touch and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you.